All right, cool. Welcome to applying and getting into the top US colleges. You are in the right place. My name is Justin, and this here is also Steph Shu from Admitsee. And if you are looking for underwater basket weaving, this is not your webinar. You're in the wrong place. But if you are interested in getting into college at the top, we do have some great content for you about all of that. So without any hesitation, let's just dive into some introductions. So I'm going to stop sharing this screen so that you can meet us both. I'll start with myself. I'm Justin Taylor. I'm the founder of Wow College Essay. I help high school students just like you write applications that stand out and communicate who they are, your authentic values, your real stories, and get into colleges like the ones we're going to be talking about today. I love what I do. I'm a writer myself, so narrative is my life, and college admissions is also a family business. I learned this from my mom, who was the editor-in-chief at College Data, which is a search site for colleges and scholarships. Anyway, I could go on about myself. I'd love to hear about Stephanie.
Thanks, Justin. Hi, I'm Steph, and I'm the founder of Admitsee. If you don't know what Admitsee is, it's a platform of crowdsourced application files that are shared by admitted college students themselves. And what's unique about our platform is we incorporate not only your quantitative data, but also your qualitative data, including essays, your advice, what you did over the summers, so extracurriculars as well. And we also have demographic info. So we can talk a little bit about that later. And I think for me, the reason that college admissions, like this process, was something that I was really interested in is because I have my own personal journey in the process and kind of trying to understand what it takes to get in and how to really talk about myself. And I had that like a same process going into law school, which is where I founded the company. And what else do I want to add? I guess my other life, I also do some startup advising. And so when I think about how to position founders and brands, I'm also bringing in that sort of like narrative, how to think about your own development. So bring a little bit of that in today as well.
Awesome. Yeah. So we're going to be diving into some real student stories, some from students I've worked with and some from Steph's Admitsee site. So if you don't know what that is, you're going to be checking that out tonight. It's really incredible how that can really up level your application process. So we're going to go ahead and jump into tonight's big topic, which is what the heck is going on at the top right now. We're going to start with some lessons from last year. We're going to then pivot to what admissions officers do and how they think. So some of you will have heard this if you've heard some of my webinars before. It might be a bit of a review, but it's really critical information. So make sure you have your listening cap on. We're going to do something called a cross-application narrative exercise. You'll know what that is when we get there. And then we will look at some real student stories, as I said, and open up some Admitsee files, what students are actually doing to get into top colleges. And there might be some surprises for you. So really stick around for this whole webinar because it is not what you may be thinking. We're also going to talk a little bit about how race and diversity figure into admissions at the top now that affirmative action is basically over in terms of race. And then we will also chat a bit about the use of AI tools. which is a big development for this admission cycle as well. All right. And then, yes, your questions. So a bit of housekeeping. If you have a question, feel free to write it in the Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You can also, next thing, the landscape right now. Again, if you've been in some of my other webinars, this is some stuff I've shared before. I'm going to zip through this, and hopefully you'll get the needs met there. There is a slight decrease happening in the number of applicants because of COVID. So a lot of students who were negatively affected by COVID, which was many students, have pivoted to going straight to work, doing gap years, stretching out the college process. So there's a slight decrease, but this is not true of the schools that you're interested in. The top tier has had a huge surge in the number of applications. So the number of applicants maybe not be different, but the number of applications has gone up, mostly because of the changes around SATs and ACTs and tests. So that is not true, though, at a lot of the, quote, lower tier schools, or some of you might think of as safety schools, even some well-known ones like Fordham. The other reason that students are applying more to more schools is an interest in location. This has really changed in the past year. There's a huge desire to be in a big cosmopolitan city. And I think that might be because during the pandemic, we missed each other. We wanted to be around people. I was saying to Stephanie earlier, it's like we all felt like the Little Mermaid who wanted to be where the people are. And so the schools that are in the big metropolises, in the Bay Area, in Boston, in New York, in LA, these places are having a huge surge in the number of applications. So NYU, BU, UC Berkeley, UCLA, USC. These are the most popular schools in terms of the number of applications. Their acceptance rates have gone way, way down. And the quality of the student body has gone way up. So one of the cool things about this change is that these schools have a higher quality student, but it has made them harder to get into. And so one piece of advice I often give to my students this year is consider emerging cities. So Denver, Seattle, Austin, Miami, and to some extent New Orleans, although New Orleans has become sort of like a Boston, like everyone's applying to the schools there. And it makes some sense, right? A lot of the jobs people get after college end up in these places. But if you are willing to be flexible, an emerging city might be a more comfortable acceptance rate for you. Now, we're here to talk about top schools today. So you might be like, why would I care about an emerging city or a lower tier school? Well, because there's a lot of competition out there. And that's the next thing I want to talk about, which is the holistic view of your list. So the top tier, which we're here to focus on, should not represent the majority of anyone's list. It is a big crapshoot, even for those of us who have incredible GPAs and grades, and we're going to get into all of the details of this. So I really recommend that your list be kind of like a sandwich. The bread on the bottom and top of the sandwich do not constitute the bulk of the sandwich. So in your list, think about this. Is it top heavy? Maybe look at the mid-tier some more. The mid-tier would be a school like a BU, actually, schools that have acceptance rates that are higher than 20%. Well, no, BU is now in the teens. So sorry for those of us who are aiming for that one, but in higher than 20%. And then do have some state schools on your list. Don't just aim for the top, y'all. Other things to think about when it comes to fit are what schools really excel in the academics you want to pursue, what schools have a really strong alumni network that you might not have heard about. That is a huge deal. A lot of students don't think about this. Alumni networks are usually the path to employment and other kinds of important elements in life. So I highly recommend checking out schools that have that strong school spirit, where the alumni network is really strong. Michigan is a famous example. They're more of a mid-tier school that has what's called the UMich Mafia. It is totally real. And then the number one thing I also say is think about talking to real students. Admitsee is all about connecting high school students and current college students. So you can learn from the current student body, current enrolled students, about what the school is really like on the ground. That information you cannot buy. Well, at Admitsee, I guess you sort of could, but it is worth its weight in gold, is what I mean. It is truly, truly valuable. It can change a lot. And as well as seeing schools in person. All right, so I wanted to zip through that just so you have all of that. We will definitely take questions about the landscape in general. If you have them, I want to hear them. But first, I also want to talk about admissions officers and how they think. So again, if you've been to my other webinars, this character is familiar. This is David from Cornell. I want you to hear this quote from this person, because this really sets up the right mindset I want you to have, that Stephanie and I want you to have as you think about top schools. So this is his experience of enrolling students at Cornell. One year, I had a student with a near perfect SAT score and straight A's. I'm just going to pause here and tell you, this is everybody. Everybody in the pile looks like this. So if you think, I have a really high SAT score, ACT score, I have all these APs, I have such a high GPA, I should be getting into these places, think again. Everyone who's competitive at these places looks like this. So that side of your application is really important to get into like the first phase of admissions at a top school. But it's this next part he talks about where you can really bring it home and close. So this is what he says. I'd originally put this student in the submitted pile, but then we had to reduce the list. And of course, they always have to reduce the list because the pile is huge. I reread his essays, and frankly, they were just a little more boring than the other kids, so I cut him. Boring was the only justification I needed, and he was out. Boring. So no one on this webinar is boring. We can totally all communicate ourselves in a way where what's truly unique and of value and quote interesting about us comes through. You do not have to be boring. No one here does. So we're here to talk about how to stop that, how to prevent that. Here's another perspective from this woman. She's a reader for Yale as well as MIT. And I think the way she puts it really kind of sums it up. Some 70% of kids who apply are qualified to come to school here. So again, she's like, everyone has the high GPA and SATs and the amazing resumes. They all look like this. And we have space for 1 in 10. We can be as choosy as we like. This person once said to me, I could literally go into the reject pile like 3 or 4 times after I've admitted a freshman class and admit a freshman class that is just as good. Literally, guys, literally. So this next statement is really what it comes down to. We can be as cheesy as we like. It almost always comes down to whether or not you're a likable person. An admissions officer is really asking herself, would I like to hang out with this guy or gal for the next 4 years? Likable. Would I like to hang out with this person? I want to unpack a little bit this word likable, okay? Likable in the world of college admissions doesn't mean like popular. It means this person is someone I could talk to, the way she says here. This is someone I would like totally enjoy, like sitting down in Starbucks and like learning about them, picking their brain, learning about their point of view, hearing some stories from their life, debating an idea with them. That's what they mean by likable, in the sense of like college student likable, right? We're all applying to be a student here, not to be something else, unless we're applying, as an athlete, which is a very different path that we're not covering here in this webinar.
Can I jump in, Justin? Just like
Yeah,
quickly
yes,
with
please do.
I love what you said about likable. I think another way to frame and think about this is also, does this person have self-awareness, and do they have a genuine curiosity about the world where they would be interesting to have a conversation with because there's a willingness to learn and a receptiveness and an open-mindedness. And then lastly, what would they be able to contribute? Like, would they be able to contribute interpersonally on campus as well? So those are some of the ways that I would define what a successful, likable college student would be.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. Yeah, we're going to unpack more of this because the schools are looking for particular traits. So this brief, quote from Helen is one way to put it, but we will unpack that in detail. Thank you so much, Stephanie. I love pie charts. This is, of course, not a scientific, studied result that I'm showing you here. But in my estimation, as a professional in this field, at the top tier, when it comes to admission and what really determines entry, the character side of your application. So you have the quantitative side that Stephanie mentioned, which is all of your academics, your GPA, your test scores. Then you have the qualitative side, which has to do with your essays, your activities, and your rec letters from your academic recommenders, and maybe even a character recommender that you add. We can talk more about padding out your application with more points of view. This is very true at the top, that this side of the application is a huge factor, huge. And less true at mid-tier schools or in state systems, which are much more regimented, and the admissions process is more standardized. All right, so let's jump into a real student. So this is Miles. Miles was a student I worked with a couple years ago, and I think his story really encapsulates the power of sharing who you really are. So he came to me really passionate about business. He had a really exciting resume full of business experience, real business experience, as well as business academic training, very high GPA, high test scores, and he was very interested at the very top schools for business. So you could UC Berkeley Haas, the McDonough School at Georgetown, the Wharton School at UPenn, all of them. The name school at UMich, the one at Rice, and so on. So he had a lot going on for him in the quantitative side of his application, right? But he was worried. The challenge for him was that he felt like he was indistinguishable from similar applicants. And I want to tell you that this challenge is the challenge of everybody applying at the top, because the transcripts and resumes look very similar at the top, as we've noticed before. And he had talked to a few other professionals like me in college admissions, other counselors, and they said, we really can't help you. They said to him to apply with a different major, Asian studies, because he was really into advocacy for Chinese community, and then try and switch majors later in the school. This, if you have ever heard this advice, throw it into the garbage. It is a horrible idea. It is a horrible idea. Schools see it coming a mile away. When you see a student like Miles with a transcript that's full of business courses and extracurriculars full of business courses, like literally all of them, and they're applying to do Asian studies, you're like, my eye, right? So the important thing here to do is what we're going to talk about next. So I want to pass this off to Stephanie. We're going to, oh, no, not just yet. She and I are going to talk about some of the qualities that come to the foreground in a really strong essay or really strong application at the top. So there are a few words that admissions officers use to talk about the kind of student they're looking for. Sometimes they refer to them as a citizen student, an ethical student. Sometimes they use the phrase autonomous learner or mini expert. The idea here is that the student is more than just academically really strong and really clear on what they want to study. They're also very connected to their drive to learn and to their drive to make a difference. So it's not just about, I really want to study X, it's I really want to study X because I want to make this difference in Y. I like to say that they are drawn to society's big, hairy problems, or BHPs, and I will get into that. So there's a passion for learning, whether it's academic or not. There's a very clear passion for learning. And there's some other qualities that Stephanie started to mention. So curiosity, resilience, or grit, really, really sought after, especially after the pandemic, which is the ability to pivot and adapt when you don't get what you expect, to work through hard things. These schools at the top are hard. So no matter how well your high school has prepared you, they are really hard. I have many students who are in these schools and they get there and they're like, whoa, the freshman year is a huge learning curve, and they're meant to be that way. And that's why they're very picky about who they let in. The other quality I like to identify or name is authenticity. They like people who bring a point of view that they own and aren't putting on a show. They are really being themselves. Anything else you would add to this, Stephanie?
I think related to authenticity, yeah, I mentioned this a little bit, which is a self-awareness. So in order to be fully authentic to your experience and your voice, you need to have done some introspection and have some self-awareness. So anything that indicates that for you, and I'm going to share a couple examples of students who have done this in a really thoughtful and unique way. But I would say that I mentioned curiosity as well for the world, for viewpoints that aren't your own.
Yeah. And the last thing I want to say about this is that these qualities are mostly communicated in the essays, the rec letters, your interviews, the activities list, the resume, and that's good news because these are all things that you can control, things that you can have influence over. So if you're on this webinar or you're watching it later, like, you're in a great position to really work on this side of your application. It really matters. So let's see how some other students have done this. Take it away, Stephanie.
Great. So I wanted to speak about this particular student who applied to UPenn as his top choice, because we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but he was able to showcase his diversity of background as well as his diversity of experience. Justin, I'm not gonna ask you to actually click into the profile, just like keep in mind, this is one of the profiles. I'm actually gonna share a package at the end of the webinar that you can go to unlock this particular student. But in his essay, he talks about how he grew up in Bogota, Colombia. And for him, there was sort of a coming into his own and taking up space. So very introverted, very unsure of where he stood, especially in sort of like the social hierarchy of where he grew up, and really started to like take up space and speak up for himself. And there's an aspect of that that shows a willingness to transition from, you know, a former way of being into like ownership of who you are. And yeah, I would say I really also just like enjoy his how he talks about himself, the little blurb of got into UPenn, Cornell, Berkeley, USC, doing what he loves without sacrificing his mental health or social life. So definitely check out his profile. The next one I want to highlight is a Harvard student who is pre-law but studying bio. And she talks a bit about this in her other essays, like her interest in academics. But I liked her essay in particular because it demonstrated a mindset shift. So for this particular student, she wrote about how growing up in New York City, with in an Asian household with multi-generations, already like, again, similar, you can still talk about sort of your diverse backgrounds, like where you come from. But she highlights the fact that she is sort of expected to do all these things on behalf of her family members, her older family members. So there's like translating, just like things she has to do as a first generation student here in the US. And she used to think of that as a total bore, like such a chore, an obligation, until there's like a moment, a really sweet moment that she has with her grandmother. And her grandmother doesn't really show affection, but was just like so grateful to what she did for her, just like packing up her suitcase. And it's such a mundane moment that you're like, how do you write this essay about this really simple, like nothing moment? But for her, it was a huge mindset shift of, oh, I have to do these things that are like obligatory, to, wow, I really gave my grandmother this gift of offering her my time and my care. And from that point on, she like totally shifted, like things that used to annoy her, like having to translate a bunch of things, documents for her family members, or like even like teaching them how to use, like teaching her parents how to use new tech. She saw that as like a way to basically like give this gift to people that she cares about. And it's, you know, you think about that and you're like, it's such like a simple essay, but it shows such a willingness to shift your mindset. I think the next one we get, we have like two more I'm gonna try to breeze through. Yeah. So this student who applied to Stanford, actually like good GPA, but didn't end up having test scores because he opted not to take standardized tests. So I thought that was interesting as an alternative to like what you see most of the time with these top tier candidates. But I loved his essay about, I believe he titled it Pigeon Seeker. And it's an essay about how he had this debilitating childhood fear of pigeons. I mean, who doesn't? But he, especially being in New York, they are aggressive, but I digress. He has this like intense fear, and it just got so bad that he He's like, you know what? I'm gonna see if I can overcome this thing. He like sees all these people out on a square, like feeding the pigeons, and he's like, all right, I'm gonna do it. And he like goes through this whole like inner journey. He grabs the corn and he throws it, and he's like like bombarded by pigeons. And it's like this moment of overcoming something that he didn't think he'd be able to. It was this huge mountain for him to climb. And from that moment, like he uses that example in his essay to then shift into, here's how I believe I can adapt and overcome challenges, like a willingness to tackle things head on. So again, really simple premise, but it's done like it's a very thoughtful essay. Does it with a lot of humor. So I really love this one. And then the last one I wanted to highlight of the Admitsee profiles that I put in the presentation is this student who's now at NYU studying music. It was, he talks about how he actually is pairing music with therapy and how he discovered the ability, the sort of like transformative ability of music to really change people's lives, especially at the end of life. So he was, I believe he was volunteering at a hospital and was just kind of playing this song and then realized it, like he made this huge difference at the end of someone's life. And so for him, music is this like therapeutic, curative aspect. And he really like highlights that throughout his entire candidacy. This profile I also recommend because he talks quite a bit about being a student at NYU. For a lot of people, like as Justin mentioned earlier, these big cities are super appealing. It's exciting. Maybe you haven't lived there before, but I think really getting that inside scoop from current students of what it's like to actually practically live in a really expensive city like New York, and what that experience is like and how that differs, for example, like an urban setting from a more suburban or smaller college town is a big part of how you build a list. So hope I didn't take up too much time, Justin. I'll kick it back to you.
Oh, no way did you take up too much time. This is excellent stuff. These are really fascinating, rich applications. And I love all of the personality that's coming through that you're sharing. And for all of you watching, that really does matter. So I encourage you all to dare to share your personalities more. I want to jump now back to some methods that I use with my students. So this is something I call the passion exercise. Essentially, what I have my students do is name 3 passions that make up their educational and professional goals. And then we use this Venn diagram, if you will, to guide the essays and the rec letters and everything else so that the application has a focus. One of the things that can really help an application is a coherent narrative across the application. Sometimes I call this the cross-application story or the cross-application narrative. These universities literally spend 5 minutes reading these applications. 5 minutes per reader. And so it might add up, if there's multiple readers, it might add up to 15 minutes or 20 minutes, but per person, it's 5. And so in that 5 minutes, it's really important that the experience for them be coherent and cohesive. And one way to really help that is to identify these passions of yours and stick to them throughout the application. And when you're recruiting recommenders and it comes time for their letter writing, reaching out to them with some pointers about things to talk about. This is totally cool to do, to guide the content in your application so that it has coherence. The other reason is because there's a humongous pile of applications, as you just learned about, and it's very easy for applications to fade into the background, and I don't want that for you. So having a coherent, clear narrative through your application that has some dimension as well, so not just one passion, but a few, really helps. And one of those passions has to do with impact. So I'm going to get into that because the way Miles does this in his application is really cool. So again, he came to me with this problem of having the strong transcript and everything else, but not knowing how to communicate himself. And so I sat down with him and learned about him and learned he had a lot of love of business, as was evident, but also a lot of community leadership experience, advocating in his Chinese community for cultural awareness, cultural diversity in the Bay Area, as well as just a lot of volunteering. And he really believed that business was a really great way to impact the local community. And so he was really about small businesses, local businesses that are impact driven. And we came up with a really cool topic together. He was working at the time at Panda Express. So again, really mundane, right? Really ordinary thing, a summer job, a high school student having a summer job doing food service. But he was also at the same time doing a summer course at Georgetown in business. And he really liked to talk about this course and even how this Panda Express job demonstrated some of the things he was learning. And that inspired him to create an impact-oriented restaurant as one of his projects. And so he talks about that whole process in his essay. And it was very thoughtful. His point of view was very clear and it had a lot of humor in it. So Stephanie mentioned the humor in some of these essays that she read. That is a big impact in the reading experience. So if you feel that you have a sense of humor, totally share it. It actually is a relief for a lot of these schools because it's human, it's real, it's authentic. He ended up getting into every single school he applied to, including Wharton. And he was waitlisted there, but got in everywhere else. And he decided on Berkeley because they offered him a full scholarship in the end. And he's there now doing UC Berkeley Haas. So great success. He loves what he's doing. It's super hard. He is getting he's learning his chops. I'll say it that way. But he earned it. He really is excelling. It's so cool to see him progress. So I want you to think about this for yourself right now. I want you to take a few minutes to write down what are your academic passions. I want you to name 2 and get as specific as you can. So don't just say like business. Say, I'm really interested in business that has an impact in the local community, or don't just say computer science, right? Say, I'm really interested in data analysis for the medical field or something like that. If you can't get that niche, that's cool. But the more specific you get, the better things go for admissions. That's what I've seen across the board. The more specific the student gets, the more the school responds to you. Because again, we're going to talk about this in a little bit. Diversity still matters to them. So having a specific interest and a specific point of view really matters. The next thing is think of a big problem in the world. I call this the big hairy problem. And that your degree could impact, that you feel some strong curiosity about or even desire to change. Write that down as well. So you have 2 academic passions and then 1 big hairy problem in the world you want your degree to impact. And then when you have those three things in your own time, not right now, but in your own time, take a look at your transcript and your resume and ask yourself, do these two documents tell this story? Does it tell the story of a person who loves these two academic things and is trying to impact this stated big, hairy problem? If your transcript and your resume do not tell that story, it's going to be a little harder for you. So it's important that those documents match up with what ends up in this Venn diagram, because you have to have evidence that this is true. You can't just say this is what you want. You have to have evidence of it. And you use the application to demonstrate that evidence. All of the elements in your application are about reinforcing these things. And the students I work with, we use this Venn diagram a lot. I don't want to linger too long on this, just in case this is new to you. I'll be sending out a PDF with this exercise in it, so you can do it later. Really key, really, really key. All right, so now I want to talk about the college essay specifically. This is something I have gone over in great detail in another webinar earlier in June. So you can go to my YouTube channel and see that there if you haven't seen that. But I just want to go over this very briefly in case you're new to starting the college essay or new to me. The more unique your topic is, the better. And I like my students to really lean into what is weird and what is nerdy. That student who poured corn seeds all over himself to get attacked by pigeons, that is so good, because no one else will have a story about that. I had a student who loves basketball. She loves basketball, but she is really irritated by the sound of sneakers on the court. When I don't know if you know that sound, that squeak, squeak, squeak sound. It just bugged her so much. So kind of similar to the pigeon guy, she listened to ASMR, like YouTubes, which is this thing where you talk really close and whispery, and it like brings up sensations in the ears and in the body. And that changed her experience of listening. That conditioned her ears to listen in a new way. And she turned that squeak sound into more of an ASMR experience for her, and used that same idea to kind of embrace a lot of complex, challenging things that were harder for her in her life. It's just one brief example. Panda Express, also kind of weird, kind of odd. These things really linger in the mind. So I really recommend scratching around in your life, look for those topics, look for those experiences in your life that are odd. They really help you stand out. There's a few topics I would say tend to be red zone. I put a big no here. It's not like you can't ever. I have plenty of examples of exception. Many students that I've worked with have talked about things on this list. Death, divorce, depression, we call those the 3Ds. We tend to discourage because it takes a lot of maturity to talk about these big hardships, and they're real. You want to be real and authentic, and so you want to go to these big things in our lives that impact us, especially when we're your age. Again, if you're not working with a trained essay coach who really understands this process and the role the essay has in admissions, I would be a little hesitant about it. One thing I will say, if you want to go for it, talk more about the overcoming of the hardship than talking about the hardship itself. I like to say, turn a hardship story into a strength story. The other topics here, big game, it's just because everyone talks about the big game, and I don't want you to fade into the background. So that means the sports championship, that means the big chess game, as well as the big debate for the debate team, or the big DECA competition or science Olympiad. These are pretty classic, and a lot of students fade into the background. I don't want that for you. when they talk about these topics. Again, a point of view that's really unique on these things could be great. Like you're learning to drive and you're late for the big debate competition and you're like having to like use your learner's permit to get to the competition on time. Like that's different, right? Service trips and vacations are here because they are usually experiences that the student did not generate. Vacations and service trips are generated by schools and parents and churches and community groups. Schools don't want to learn about that stuff. They want to learn about things that you took initiative to do, the challenges that you set out for yourself, like the guy exposing himself to pigeons when he was afraid of them. That's a great example of taking initiative to grow. I love that. Get help. Discernment and advice from adults who know this process is critical for top tier applications. Really, really, really critical. And if you are a great writer, that is awesome. This is still a very odd niche challenge. The essay has a very important role to play. So I do recommend highly, highly, highly getting help. This is something I help students do. If you want to talk to me about that, that's great. There's also folks on Admitsee's website that do this if you want to go check some other folks out. I also don't recommend starting with the Common App, the prompts in general. I find them not very conducive to writing, but do what you need to do. The last thing I'll say is, if you're scratching around for something to write about, one thing I have found to often be really successful is just to write about the story of discovering your passion. So if you have a very clear academic interest that you want to pursue, like Miles did, so his Panda Express essay was kind of an essay about his discovering his love of business and why it felt like such a big, important discipline in our society, if you could think of it as a discipline or path. Your journey or your story of discovering your passion is also really bankable, I find, in the admissions process. So that's one place you could turn. Briefly, this is a breakdown of the approach that I use with students. I call it the WOW. It's what I named my business after. It is very simply about naming your wants and really reinforcing those in your application. They could be academic, they could be something else that doesn't happen in college, but talking about it still brings out your voice, which is what the O stands for, which is being original. So original stories, when you tell original stories across the application or in the essay, your original voice comes out and your original thinking. So your point of view and your original thinking really matter, which is what W means, wisdom, the second W. Reflecting out loud in your essays really matters because they're here, the readers are trying to see what makes you tick, see how you think. It also shows your college readiness. So sharing how you reflect out loud in your writing really matters. I have an exercise called the College Essay Starter. I'll be linking to this in my follow-up emails, but essentially it's a way to find these niche topics for yourself. It's like top 10 lists. So you'll get that in your email as well. Okay, so now sort of the hot topics. The affirmative action that these top tier schools used is no longer possible. If you have not been following the news, the Supreme Court had a case that came from students from Harvard and from UNC that felt they were discriminated against because affirmative action locked them out of spaces, that students that were less qualified got spaces because of their race. And the Supreme Court sided with them. And so these top tier schools, which were really the only schools practicing this, can no longer use race. However, they're really still committed to diversity. So I was hoping Stephanie and I could share some of our thoughts about the impact of this. We also want to hear your questions about this. Here's a few ideas. Stephanie, what do you what are some of your takeaways going through your mind right now about this decision?
Yeah, I mean, if I pull back from sort of just like socio-political commentary about this, and I'm thinking about it from the standpoint of like, okay, I'm an individual who's applying to this school. What does this mean for me? Um, I'm thinking about it in, you have it highlighted here, but thinking about it in terms of like diversity of experience, diversity of point of view, and how do you bring that? Sometimes it's still your background, your ethnicity, that plays a huge role in your point of view and your diverse experiences. But where else you can highlight that is, as we mentioned in some of the examples we gave, your areas of growth. So I would think about with a diversity statement, you can still talk about what makes you tick, what experiences you had that then informed the values that you hold to make you who you are right now. And so the more sort of like niche and unique and thoughtful you are about the different experiences that you've had, that is going to make you stand out from the crowd as like, this is someone with a unique point of view. So we can definitely say a lot more about this. I'll take a quick look at the open questions and let you talk a bit.
Yeah, well,
about
you're
your
taking a
thoughts.
look at the Q&A, which we're going to pivot to in a second. I'll just add as well that it's totally okay to talk about your ethnicity, your race, or any of the other markers that make you unique. Diversity really matters in these schools. And I like to encourage students to talk about race if it really matters to them. Like Miles, it really mattered to him, his Chinese ethnicity, his Chinese community really mattered to him. So he talked a lot about it in his applications, and he was embraced for that. Some students sometimes wonder, oh, they want diversity, so I should talk about my race. And it really doesn't work that way, because authenticity is what they're looking for. And other students sometimes think they have to talk about how their struggle as a minority is what schools want to read about. And that's really not true either. They want to hear how you overcome struggles, for sure. Like I said earlier, hardship stories should be strength stories, but it's no need to put on display your struggles, no need at all. It is truly all of you that matters. And in some cases, I have found that students that focus on race-based hardships in their applications end up becoming two-dimensional in the admissions process. The schools struggle to see the whole person. They only see them through that race struggle narrative. So that is no one's struggle makes them. No one's. We are much more than just one struggle or multiple struggles. So I like to say character matters. How you respond to life matters, not a marker like race. You finding anything in the Q&A about this?
Yeah, there's one question about sort of being mixed race, and I would say, again, it's the focus. Our recommendation here is around the experience. So what, maybe there's like a mixed race experience that has been really formative, but I think there are other aspects about growing up with that background that maybe brought sort of unique experiences that can then be leveraged into other topics. So that's how I would consider that topic.
Yeah.
We have a couple other questions, not necessarily about this topic. So I would say, let's move on, and then we can get to the Q&A.
Yeah. So another hot topic that a lot of people are asking me about is how to use AI in the application process. Is it safe to do it? Is it not? And this is constantly evolving. the power of things like ChatGPT are changing daily. And I think you who are younger have more of your finger on the pulse of what's possible. I will say that AI like ChatGPT can play a helpful role in the writing process, brainstorming, generating ideas, even throwing an essay that's over word count into the AI chat box and asking for a suggested edit can be really helpful. I would never, ever, ever trust an AI with my application. AI written applications will never get into a top college because the need of a voice is so strong. And for better or worse, you know, AI flattens voice. So I do recommend it as a writing tool on the side to get outlines, get ideas, but don't rely on it to do the heavy lifting for you. Really, you are the one who can synthesize and give a voice to your application. Any thoughts on that, Stephanie?
Not a ton more. I second that. It's
Yeah.
useful as an initial sort of outline. One of the
Yeah.
questions earlier was asking if they were undecided as a major and extracurriculars aren't supplementing that major, and there isn't necessarily a clear theme in the application. I would say
Yeah.
that's potentially a good way to use ChatGPT, is to throw in,
Yeah.
here are a bunch of my passions, here's what I'm doing, and like, what are potentially some topics that I could write about, and utilize that as something you're going with. And that's something actually we're considering developing at Admitsee as well, looking at our application database and training the AI tool on what was successful for different profile types, and then sort of making recommendations around how you can best some of the best positions that we would recommend, and given your extracurriculars, what you're interested in, and what you might want to study in the future.
Beautiful. Yeah, I'm very excited to see how Admitsee and AI can empower students to learn even more about what's best for their college admissions journey. I think it's really rich. Okay, so let's just sum this up for you guys. We will jump into more questions. I like to say that at the end of a college admissions journey, this is not how we should be feeling. So if you don't know what this is the rose scene from The Bachelorette, and she's going to give out her rose to her bachelor. And a lot of students applying at the top tier feel like the dudes in this picture. There's too many of them, only one of her. But when you really look at your life and your stories and your character and what you value, I hope what happens for you is you come to see that you are a person of great value and that you are really awesome. And the schools are the ones who are lucky to be learning about you. So I like to say an admissions journey should flip that whole narrative, that you're the one handing out the rose in this image, and that the colleges are the ones who are hungry to know you. And that really happens when you get down to the details of yourself, like that guy with the corn and the pigeons. I just love that. Also, get started now. I mean, obviously you're all here, so you are getting started now. But especially for top tier schools, the amount of work required to get the applications in a great shape is substantive. So I recommend putting aside 30 minutes every day or so, starting now, or if you're busy with internships and so on, you know, and you want a summer break, I understand you, but honestly, it can take a lot, especially if you have a lot of schools on your list. Very briefly, what I help students do is one-on-one coaching, essentially. I help students with the application from A to Z, from every angle, also list building. And as I mentioned, I'm going to be sending you the essay starter that you can use to start your essay. And if you want a consultation about it, I'm happy to do that for free, like totally. So you want to talk about your essay starter or anything else about your application process, I do that, no problem, for free. I'll send the info about that. Also, you can also just email me. And if you are interested in working with me, I have these things called unlimited packages where I help you do every last detail for a school's application from A to Z. And I'm offering a 10% discount on that until July 27. So you also get some info about that in the email. Stephanie also has some cool things happening at Admitsee. Let's hear about that.
Yes, so our Admitsee offer for attendees of this webinar is 20% off of any of our class year packages or class year plans. So the way that our plans are structured, it's for senior year students who are applying or incoming senior year students. So access remains until June of next year. So you have a full year of access. And then for younger students, it's a slightly different pricing plan, but it's based on your graduation year. So if you're interested in those plans, use the code WOWJuly for 20% off of any of those premium plans. And here is a great package we just put together. We talked a lot about growth and transformation, finding the strength essay through your struggle or your obstacles. And to reiterate, there was a question about like, what if you haven't had any struggles? And maybe that's not the topic that you write about, or maybe really think about areas of growth. So you don't necessarily need to have struggled in order to grow, but there are definitely ways for you to have shifted your mindset or come to a different point of view. And that is also a huge opportunity. And a couple of the profiles here are highlight that as well. And so you can go find this at, if you're interested in the packages, you can go to admitsee.com/packages. And we have a number of different types there. You can search by school, by essay topic, by student background. So definitely check those out. Our packages are usually like 5 profiles, so you can unlock all at once.
So cool, guys. All right, so let's see if there are any questions left. What is our opinion on showing standardized tests versus not? If you have really strong standardized tests, please do so. I would say it's always a positive. There, at the top, schools use the standardized test in 2 ways. One is to see evidence of very strong ability at rigorous academics. So proving that you can do something hard, that's academic. That's essentially what those tests do, because these schools are super hard. The other is, this is maybe not so nice, but it can be a sign that the student has means. They have the means to hire a tutor and excel at that test. So when the student has means, it can help with the admissions process in some schools that are trying to make a budget. And most of these top tier schools have endowments so large that they're totally need blind, and that's not an issue, but sometimes it is. And so the high scores can be used that way. If you have a score that is below the threshold of the school, I would be like that Stanford applicant who didn't share his SATs and just shared his great resume and his transcript and his story and connected that way. Because all these top tier schools, except for Georgetown, do not need these scores. MIT also needs them, sorry. But everywhere else is test optional. So if you want that option, go for it. I would say it's totally exercised by some people. The majority of students who are admitted do submit scores. Yeah, well, I guess that's it. So we've answered everything. This has been a total treat, y'all. We haven't answered everything. I know we haven't, but we've answered some things. And it's been a real treat for me to share this content. I know it was a lot. So if your brain's feeling a little heavy right now, go take a break. And I'll be in touch with you guys over email. And if you want, you can reach out to me at the email address on the screen. You can reach out to Stephanie as well. Let's stay in touch. Anything you want to say goodbye, Stephanie?
Just tell your story. Be yourself. And it's such like a whatever kind of, it can feel like a whatever kind of piece of advice of be yourself, but truly there's nobody else who is you. And so the more that you can show how you are unique and what makes you tick and what you love, that people would be like, huh, I never thought of that, or I wouldn't have known that about you. Yeah, the more unique you can make your story and your candidacy. So think about it in those terms, and best of luck to all of you. Feel free to reach out to us after this as well. And yeah, good luck.
All right. Well, with that, I wish you all a good night. And yeah, reach out if you need anything. Take care.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for joining us.